We welcome you this morning, and we welcome your opening statement.
Thank you, Justice Wiggins. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for being here, for doing this daunting but very important work. You've been very gracious and affirming to me, and I truly appreciate it. I'd like to begin by telling you a bit about my background that predates and fills in some of the gaps of my application. When I was a kid, my family moved around a lot, in and out of Washington, D.C. I graduated from Woodrow Wilson, a D.C. public high school, when I was 16. I attended Oberlin College, the first coeducational college in the United States. That's what the sign on the highway says. One of the first to be fully integrated and a stop in the Underground Railroad network. Taking advantage of one of the many Oberlin opportunities to study abroad, I was accepted into the program to attend Hebrew University in Jerusalem for a year. I immersed myself in a foreign country, which included taking intensive language classes and soaking in the rich history and diversity of cultures and religions around me. As a result of taking large class loads at Oberlin and Hebrew University, and taking evening classes while I worked full-time during the summers, I was able to complete my undergraduate studies in 3 years and graduated from Oberlin when I was 19. For a variety of reasons, including the student loans hanging over my head, and knowing that eventually I wanted to attend graduate school, I enlisted in the United States Army. This was immediately after Vietnam, when the Women's Army Corps, or the WAC Corps, was just beginning to be integrated into the regular Army. Although my first duty station was very close to home, literally miles from my childhood home, I was ultimately allowed to transfer to Fürth, Germany, a bedroom community of Nuremberg. This was the height of the Cold War, with many US troops in Europe. Upon promotion to E5, the specialist rank equivalent to a buck sergeant, I became the NCOIC, the non-commissioned officer in charge of the chapel center on base. My coworker and I supported a full range of religious activities for troops, their dependents, and other civilians, working with a Catholic priest, an Orthodox rabbi, and several Protestant ministers. When I joined the military, my home address was that of my mother and stepfather. While I was stationed at Walter Reed, they moved to Iowa City, where my stepfather, George Strait, became the director of the law library. Thus, when I discharged from the Army, I landed in Iowa City to attend graduate school using my GI Bill benefits. After a year of taking some graduate courses, I decided that my desire to engage in public service would best be assisted by attending law school. I took advantage of the accelerated program at the University of Iowa, starting in May and continuing through the summers, so that I was able to graduate in a little over 2 years. I was allowed to participate in graduation exercises in May, and I took and passed the bar exam in June, but then I had to finish law school, and that's why my degree and license are dated actually in August of 1982. While I was in my internship at Legal Services in Iowa City, I applied to a variety of legal aid programs across the country. Many states have adopted rules that if someone has a license from a different state and works for a legal aid program, that attorney can practice for a period of time using that other state's license. Alaska had a 2-year waiver, and I accepted the staff attorney job in Bethel. After my 2-year commitment in Bethel, I again looked around at various legal aid programs around the country. I returned to Iowa and have lived and worked in Council Bluffs for over 26 years. My roots in Southwest Iowa are now very deep. My application contains information about many legal presentations I have given over the years. Then in the spring of 2009, as a group of people with swastika flags were shouting slogans in front of the Potawatomi County Courthouse, I found myself talking with many individuals that day about our Constitution and the rights that are embodied in it. I continued to speak with individuals and took part in group discussions about Iowa, our laws, and our history as a state. I continue to participate in such discussions, both as a citizen and as a bar leader, with individuals and in groups. As these vacancies on the Supreme Court emerged, I thought about how I might contribute to the court. I have talked with friends and family, colleagues and judges who have been very supportive of my application. My resume reflects the significant depth and breadth of my substantive legal experience. I have practiced in state and federal courts at the trial and appellate levels. I have appeared in front of state and federal agencies. I have civil, juvenile, and criminal experience. I am a certified mediator. I have acted as a quasi-prosecutor, such as helping clients pursue domestic abuse contempts against batterers, or aggressively acting as guardian ad litem in juvenile cases involving neglect, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. I've even filed a termination of parental rights action instead of having the county attorney do so. On the other hand, I also represent clients charged with domestic abuse. I accept post-conviction relief cases of prisoners convicted of heinous crimes, and I represent clients in parole violation cases, at least half of which currently are sex offenders. I have extensive administrative experience. I've dealt with budget concerns, personnel issues, grant writing, community collaboration, and talking with legislators. I have been part of a bargaining team in union contract negotiations. I have worked in the trenches my entire legal career. I am able to grasp issues, look at facts, and apply the law. Much of my current work, especially in disability and post-conviction relief cases, requires that I review, make sense of, use, and apply legal argument to hundreds, if not thousands of pages of documents that I have never seen before and I had no part in preparing. These include medical records, witness statements, depositions, and hearing transcripts. I have a long history of public presentations to lawyers as well as to community groups. I am able to master, interpret, and explain complicated laws and programs in plain English. I enjoy a reputation of being honest and fair with a calm temperament. I work hard and I do my homework, and I'm always willing to listen. Wherever I live, I take my responsibility of community involvement seriously, plunging myself into an assortment of service projects and other activities. If I am chosen for service on this great court, I will continue to apply myself in my work and my community with the energy and commitment with which I have always approached everything I do. I welcome your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nerenstone. We'll start on this side. Mr. Pace?
Thank you, Justice Wiggins. Good morning.
Good morning.
I see that you'd served for 6 years, it looks like, on the Grievance Commission for the Supreme Court.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that the court does is supervise lawyers and attorney discipline. Can you speak to how the system works now with the commission and with the court, and how the opinions come out and that sort of thing, and if you have any suggestions as to how that could be done better?
I think the system that I was involved in worked well. The panels, when there had to be panels formed, they were formed. A chair or a president was appointed. There were pleadings that went back and forth. Some of the panels that I sat on, including the one I did chair one, actually was ultimately decided, or recommendation from the panel was recommended on paper, and there was not a hearing. And then, of course, those recommendations go to the Supreme Court. I did sit on several panels where there were full-blown trials, hearings, some with witnesses and exhibits, and the panels consisted of both attorneys and non-attorneys. I think we worked well together, and everybody was listened to. There was good, open discussion about the facts of each case and the law. The case was presented by a prosecuting attorney from the commission, and there were defense attorneys involved. So it was like being the judge and the jury, but there were I'm trying to remember how many there were. I think there were probably 6 to 10, depending on the panel and whether people were able to be there or not.
And then after that process, as I understand, there's a recommendation to the court?
That's correct. There's a recommendation to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court basically reviews it de novo and makes a decision about whether they're going to accept it or accept the recommendation, change the recommendation, make it harsher, not so harsh.
Okay, thank you.
I
yield to Professor Cochran.
Professor Cochran, go ahead.
Thanks, Joe.
You could just run that side of the table, Joe.
Thanks so much for appearing here this morning.
I have to say I'm very, very impressed with your application, especially both your professional work and your community work and how it's focused on the most vulnerable members of our society often, and I'm very impressed and humbled in seeing how much you've done for these people, and I want to commend you for that work. Also, given this kind of work that you've done, are there ways in which our legal system in Iowa can be more responsive to people who are often on the margins of our society? How can we be more responsive to the needs that they might have?
There's always room for tweaking and changing and looking at things. I think part of it depends on how things work, or may depend on what part of the state you're in. Certainly there's some, with regard to some of the pro se forms that have come out, that's been very helpful. I have been able to provide those kinds of forms. For example, I might have somebody who I've been appointed to represent in a criminal matter, but also wants to file a pro se divorce. So I've been able to guide that person or steer that person into that direction. There's more attempts, especially in the 4th Judicial District. In the last, about 2 years ago, there was a commitment to start doing mediation in family law custody cases, and that's starting to take off a little bit more. There's a rotation schedule for that of the approved mediators throughout the 4th Judicial District, started in Pottawatomie County and then expanded. So those kinds of things, I think, to help people also take ownership of what's going on in their lives as they work within the judicial system.
Any other questions on this side of the table? Ms. Walker?
Thank you, Ms. Nerenstone. There's a lot of discussion about the need for collegiality on the court. Can you describe ways that you've had that opportunity in the past? I know most recently you've been in your own firm where you probably get to make most of the decisions and no one there to object. So how would you present yourself as far as getting along with the rest of the court and making group decisions?
Sure. Even currently in private practice, I participate, for example, with juvenile cases. We have something called family team meetings where we have social workers and attorneys and foster parents and service providers